All right, so have you heard about this whole Alaska thing?
Alaska. You mean?
Yeah, like this massive energy project they're cooking up. It's huge, like potentially $64 billion. Huge.
Wow, yeah. The Alaska LNG Project, right?
That's the one. And guess who might be joining the party? South Korean companies. We're talking big names, serious players in the energy world. So, welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we are going deep on this whole Alaska LNG situation, trying to figure out what it all means.
We've been digging through a ton of information, reports about the project, the scope, potential Korean partners, you name it. It's fascinating.
It really is. And it's not just industry chatter either. President Trump himself even mentioned this whole Alaska pipeline thing in a speech to Congress.
Right.
Talked about Korean and Japanese companies, maybe investing trillions, he said. Trillions!
It's getting serious attention. And speaking of serious, did you see Alaska's governor, Mike Dunleavy, is heading over to South Korea?
Oh, yeah, at the end of March, right. 24th and 25th, I think.
Exactly. He's going to be meeting with all sorts of bigwigs in the Korean trade and energy sectors. Even Minister Gujin is on the schedule. Looks like they're aiming to really get this Korean involvement rolling.
And he's got meetings set up with specific companies too, right?
Yep. POSCO International, SK Innovation, ENS, GS Energy, and CH Steel. The lineup is impressive.
No kidding. Okay, but before we get ahead of ourselves, for anyone just tuning in, maybe we should take a step back. What exactly are we talking about when we say Alaska LNG Project? Paint us a picture.
Sure. So imagine this. You've got Alaska, right? Up in the North Slope, they've got these vast reserves of natural gas just sitting there. The plan is to build this massive 1,300-kilometer pipeline that's like over 800 miles, stretching across the entire state, to get that gas down to the southern coast.
Hold on, 800 miles through Alaska. That sounds like a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, it's a massive undertaking, no doubt. But once they get that gas down to the coast, they're going to convert it into LNG, liquefied natural gas. It's way easier to transport that way. Then they can ship it off to Asia, Japan, South Korea, even Taiwan.
So this is like one of the biggest energy projects happening in the U.S.
Oh, absolutely. One of the largest, and it's already been given the green light, too. The U.S. Department of Energy has given them final authorization for exports. So they're ready to go.
Wow. But I keep thinking about that pipeline. Alaska is a pretty rough environment, to say the least. You've got the Arctic climate, freezing temperatures. How do they even build something like that?
Right, and that's why this whole Korean partnership is so interesting. They'll need incredibly strong steel pipes that can withstand that cold, and Korean companies are some of the best in the world at making this kind of specialized steel.
That reminds me, President Trump mentioned this pipeline in his speech. He called it massive, one of the world's largest. He said Japan, Korea, other countries were interested in partnering up and investing. He even threw out the word trillions. Now our sources put the project cost at more like $44 billion.
Right. It's a bit unclear if he was talking about a larger scope or maybe future investments. But either way, the point is, this project is getting noticed. So let's dig into this South Korean involvement a little deeper. What makes them such ideal partners, and what do they bring to the table?
Yeah, let's break it down. First up, we've got POSCO International. What's their story?
Well, POSCO is interesting because they've actually got experience developing gas fields, not just, building stuff. They were the first Korean private company to pull that off, actually in Myanmar, no less.
Wow, Myanmar. That's not exactly a walk in the park.
Exactly. It shows they can handle complex energy projects. Plus, they already run LNG terminals and even do LNG trading, so they've got the whole value chain covered.
So they know the whole process, from start to finish.
How about SK Innovation ENS? They're already pretty big in the U.S. energy scene, right?
Oh yeah, big time. They've got almost a 50% stake in the Woodford gas field down in Oklahoma. And they've been in the U.S. LNG game for over 10 years now.
So they're not strangers to the U.S. market, that's for sure?
Not at all. They've dealt with all the regulations, the permits, everything. Plus, they've got experience across the entire LNG chain, from exploration and production to liquefaction, transportation, and even supplying it to customers.
So they're kind of a one-stop shop for LNG. And GS Energy, what's their specialty?
GS Energy is another one with that integrated LNG value chain, but they're really actively looking to expand overseas. They're hungry for new markets. This Alaska project could be their big break.
I see. So they're looking to make a global splash. But let's not forget about that pipeline itself. That's where CH Steel comes in, right?
That's right. They're the steel experts, the ones who can make those super strong pipes that can handle Alaska's brutal conditions. Those pipes are the backbone of this whole project. You mentioned there are other Korean steel companies who might be interested in this too.
Yeah, a few others are on the radar. There's Danyang Steel Pipe, and then there's Hissteel. They've actually got some pretty important certifications from the American Petroleum Institute, API 5L and 5CT.
What do those certifications mean exactly?
Basically, they're like a seal of approval. They show that Hissteel meets the standards required to supply steel for oil and gas projects in the U.S. It's a big deal.
Our sources even had a quote from an industry expert who basically said Hissteel is a top contender because they've got the technical know-how and that certified supply chain. So those certifications are really a game changer, huh?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It shows they can handle a project at this scale. Okay, but let's take a wider view now. What does this all mean, strategically speaking? Why is Korea so keen on getting involved, and what's in it for the U.S.?
Yeah, good question. Let's start with South Korea. What are they hoping to gain besides just getting more natural gas?
Well, for one, it helps them diversify their energy sources. Right now, they get a lot of their natural gas from places like Qatar and Australia. Adding Alaska to the mix would give them more options, making them less reliant on any one supplier.
So it's all about spreading the risk, basically. Makes sense.
Exactly. And then there's the trade situation. You see, South Korea actually has a pretty big trade surplus with the U.S. By investing in a huge U.S. project like this, they're putting some of that money back into the American economy, which could help smooth over trade tensions.
Interesting. So it's a win-win energy security for Korea and maybe fewer trade headaches down the line. But what about the economic benefits for Korean companies?
Oh, there are plenty. Of course, the energy companies themselves stand to gain a lot. But then you've got the steel manufacturers who could get some huge contracts supplying all those pipes. And then there's shipbuilding companies. Korean companies are world leaders in building LNG carriers, so they could definitely get involved there. And even Korean construction companies could have a role to play in building the infrastructure.
So this project has the potential to boost a whole bunch of Korean industries. And from the U.S. side, what are they hoping to get out of all this?
Well, for starters, it would be a big boost for U.S. energy exports. And that would help improve their trade balance, which has been a big focus for the Trump administration.
Right, America first and all that.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about maximizing America's energy potential. And, it was actually Alaska's Governor Dunleavy who first reached out to Korea looking for investment. So they're definitely serious about this partnership.
So it seems like everyone's on board, at least in principle. But we have to talk about the downsides too, right? What are some of the risks and challenges with this whole project?
Well, the first one is pretty obvious. The cost. We're talking about $44 billion. That's a lot of money to raise, even for major companies and governments.
No kidding. That's a huge financial risk right there.
It is. And then you've got the environmental challenges. Building anything in Alaska is tough, especially something as complex as this pipeline. The weather, the terrain, it's all a major hurdle.
And what about the whole economic side of things? The price of LNG goes up and down all the time. What if the market takes a dive?
That's a legitimate concern. In fact, some Japanese companies who were initially interested in the project have already backed out because of worries about profitability. So anyone investing in this is going to need a lot of reassurance that it's going to be profitable in the long run.
So they're going to need some pretty convincing numbers. What's the mood in South Korea about all this? Are companies jumping at the chance?
I'd say they're being cautious, which is understandable. They're waiting to see the details of Governor Dunleavy's proposal, the results of feasibility studies, and how much support the Korean government is willing to give.
That makes sense. They're not just going to throw money at this without knowing all the facts. Our sources even said those three things: the project details, the feasibility studies, and government support. Those are the key factors for Korean companies. They're weighing the risks carefully. But I'm guessing all this news has already had an impact on the markets, right?
Oh, for sure. Look at Danyang Steel Pipe, for example. Their stock prices jumped up since the news about Governor Dunleavy's visit came out. Investors are betting that they'll be one of the main suppliers for the pipeline.
So people are already trying to get in on the action. And what about Hissteel? With those API certifications, they must be getting some attention too.
Definitely. Those certifications give them a real edge. Investors know they're qualified to supply this kind of project, so their stock is probably looking pretty good right now. Our sources even said that Governor Dunleavy is probably going to meet with Hissteel and some of these other companies directly to try and convince them to invest.
So it feels like this could be the start of something much bigger than just one project, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. It could be a whole new chapter in U.S.-Korea energy relations. The U.S. wants to export more energy. Korea needs to diversify its sources. It's a perfect match.
And that diversification could be a big geopolitical win for Korea, too. Getting their energy from different places makes them less vulnerable to disruptions in any one region.
Exactly. And then there's that whole trade surplus thing we talked about. If Korea invests heavily in the U.S., it could really smooth things over and strengthen the relationship between the two countries.
So it's about more than just energy. It's about strengthening the whole alliance. But it sounds like this could go even further than just a straight-up LNG supply deal.
A lot of experts think so, yeah. They think Korean companies could get involved in all sorts of energy infrastructure projects in the U.S. beyond just Alaska. We're talking steel for pipelines, building LNG terminals, maybe even getting involved in port construction. The possibilities are huge.
But let's be real, building anything in Alaska is going to require some serious technology. We're talking extreme conditions, right? This isn't just about finding the cheapest option.
No way. You need top-of-the-line technology to handle those sub-zero temperatures and the risk of earthquakes. Those pipes and everything else have to be incredibly durable and reliable.
And that's where those API certifications really matter. It shows that companies like Hissteel have what it takes to build for those kinds of conditions.
Exactly. It's a guarantee of quality and expertise. So if we look at the whole LNG value chain, from extracting the gas all the way to getting it to customers, Korean companies could have a role to play in every step.
Right, let's connect the dots. We've got companies like SK Innovation and POSCO who've got experience in developing gas fields.
Right. And then for transporting the gas and turning it into LNG, there's GS Energy, maybe SK, and of course the steel companies like CH Steel, Dongyang, and Hissteel, who are essential for that pipeline.
And on the customer side, GS Energy, with their experience in the Korean gas market, would be key. So they've got all the bases covered. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the big takeaways? What should we be paying attention to as this story unfolds?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that this could be a huge step forward for U.S.-Korea cooperation. They've got shared interests, energy security, economic benefits, strengthening the alliance. But there are also some big risks. The investment is massive, the environment is challenging, and the LNG market is unpredictable.
So there's a lot to be excited about, but also a lot of caution is needed.
Exactly. They need to do their homework, make sure it's all financially viable, and get the governments on board. And of course, Governor Dunleavy's trip to Korea at the end of March will be a big moment. That's when we'll really see if this partnership's going to take off.
All right, so let's recap the key benefits for South Korea as outlined in the sources. What are they looking at here?
So the benefits are really about energy security, diversification of their natural gas imports, and strategically addressing that trade surplus with the U.S., which could ease future trade pressures. And of course, there's the potential for new markets and opportunities for Korean companies across multiple industries.
And on the flip side, what are the big risks they need to be aware of?
Well, the financial burden is obviously a major factor. 64 trillion won is a lot of money to put on the line. Then there's the whole challenge of building and operating that huge pipeline in Alaska's harsh climate. And of course, the long-term profitability of the project is still uncertain. Some of the Japanese companies had concerns, remember.
Right, that volatility in the LNG market is always a concern. So last question, what's motivating the U.S. to bring Korea into this? What are they hoping to achieve?
Well, from the U.S. perspective, they need that Korean investment to make this project happen. It's a lot of money. Plus, it helps them achieve their goal of increasing energy exports, which would improve the U.S. trade balance. And of course, strategically, it strengthens the U.S.-Korea alliance and gives the U.S. more influence in Asia.
So it's a complex mix of factors, but it all boils down to economics, energy, and geopolitics.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into this Alaska LNG project and the potential for a major U.S.-Korea partnership. It's a story with huge implications, not just for the two countries involved, but for the global energy landscape. And as this unfolds, keep in mind that these kinds of projects go beyond just numbers and contracts. They can shape relationships between countries and even affect global security. So as you follow this story, think about those bigger picture issues. What else, beyond the things we've discussed today, could make or break a project like this? Food for thought. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.